Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Daniel Harding believed in structures. At 35, he had built a formidable career as a risk management consultant in Seattle. A city that, like him, was a monument to methodical growth and logical design. His world was one of spreadsheets, probability models, and stress tests. He assessed vulnerabilities for multinational corporations, identifying the precise points where a system could fracture. It was a profession that rewarded caution, foresight, and an unwavering belief in the data. Daniel applied this same, rigorous philosophy to his marriage. A relationship, he reasoned, was the most significant system of all, and its foundation had to be flawless. He had met Zoe 10 years ago. He was 25, already mapping out his 5-year plan. She was 23, a ceramicist, with clay under her fingernails, and a laugh that seemed to disregard acoustics. They met at a weekend artisan market near Pike Place, where she was selling misshapen, beautiful mugs that felt warm and personal in his hands. Daniel saw in her a vibrant, chaotic energy that he found compelling. She was, in his assessment, a high-reward asset, albeit one with significant volatility. He believed his stability could be the structure she needed to thrive. They married 2 years later, in a small ceremony overlooking Puget Sound. The sky was a typical Seattle gray, diffusing the light softly over the gathering. For the first several years, the structure held. Daniel worked punishing hours, building the financial bedrock of their life. He managed the investments, paid the bills, and ensured their retirement accounts grew at a predictable rate. In return, he saved his weekends for Zoe. He considered it a fair trade. They would explore the galleries in Pioneer Square, or take the ferry to Bainbridge Island. He watched, with a sort of detached pride, as she built her own career from the studio she'd set up in their converted garage. Daniel admired her talent in the way one admires a wild, beautiful force of nature. He was proud of the way she forged her own path, even if he found her methods working late into the night when inspiration struck, ignoring invoices for weeks on end, to be hopelessly inefficient. He saw her career not as a business, but as a passion project he was privileged to underwrite. But over the last 2 years, he began to log deviations in the data. The change was subtle at first, then more pronounced. Zoe spent more and more time in her studio. The door often closed. The rhythmic thud of her potter's wheel was replaced by long periods of silence. She claimed her commissions were more complex, the deadlines more demanding. Daniel accepted this explanation. He, too, had periods of intense overload at work. He trusted the system. He trusted her. Then came the new activities. Gallery openings, she'd say, dressing in a way he hadn't seen in years. Networking with other artists. Workshops in Tacoma. Daniel never questioned it. He knew that for an independent artist, networking was a necessary component of the business model. He encouraged it. She would come home late, smelling of wine and the crisp night air, her eyes bright with stories of inspiring conversations and potential new clients. Daniel would listen, processing her words, filing them away. He believed her. Because the alternative, that there was a flaw in the foundation he had so carefully constructed, was an unacceptable risk. He refused to even model the possibility. The indifference grew not like a weed, but like a structural crack. A hairline fracture that widens under pressure, until the integrity of the whole is compromised. Daniel noticed it in small, quantifiable ways. The frequency of their shared meals dropped by 30%. The duration of their evening conversations shortened. Her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now always in her pocket, or face down beside her. These were data points, anomalies in a pattern he had believed to be stable. He began to feel a low-grade irritation, the kind an engineer feels when an instrument gives an inconsistent reading. His jealousy did not manifest as passionate rage, but as a cold, analytical inquiry. Who were these contacts? What did they discuss that was so captivating it kept her out past midnight? He felt a growing sense of being excluded from a critical data stream. He attempted to address the issue with his usual logic. Perhaps we should schedule a weekly date night, he suggested one evening, to ensure we maintain a minimum threshold of quality time. Zoe had looked at him, her expression unreadable. You can't schedule intimacy, Daniel. He had logged her response as illogical and evasive. The system was clearly malfunctioning. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in late October. The Seattle rain was lashing against the windows. Daniel came home around 7, and found Zoe in the living room, curled on the sofa. In the dark, he felt a familiar tightening in his chest. The feeling he got just before a major market correction. He put his briefcase down and sat beside her. Is everything okay? Zoe took a shuddering breath. I need to tell you something, she said. Something I should have been honest about, a very long time ago. Daniel's mind immediately cycled through the most probable catastrophic scenarios. Illness. A family tragedy. He braced for impact. No, it's not that, she whispered. It's about money. Daniel. I'm in debt. I'm in serious debt. The word landed in the quiet room with the dead weight of a failed asset. Debt. Daniel processed it not with emotion, but with calculation. A liability. An unmanaged risk. What do you mean? He asked, his voice flat. How much? Zoe finally looked at him, her eyes filled with a desperate shame he couldn't quite compute. Her voice was barely audible. $47,000. 47,000. The number echoed in his mind, not as a tragedy, but as a colossal failure of oversight. He felt the air leave his lungs. How? He asked. The question was not an accusation. It was a demand for data. The explanation tumbled out of her in a frantic, disorganized flood. The freelance work had slowed. The competition was fierce. To stay relevant, she'd invested in a new, larger kiln, expensive workshops. She'd taken out personal loans. Used credit cards to maintain the illusion of stability. The interest compounded. The calls started. Now, she was drowning. Daniel listened in absolute silence. He felt a surge of something he couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't just shock. Or concern. It was a profound, almost professional, and sense of disappointment. How had he missed this? How had a risk of this magnitude developed right under his nose? Why didn't you tell me? He asked. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a formal audit. I was ashamed, Zoe whispered, tears finally tracing paths down her cheeks. I wanted to fix it myself. But it just got worse and worse. They're threatening legal action, Daniel. I'm scared. He registered her fear. Her tears. But his primary processor was already working on a solution. This was a crisis. And a crisis demanded a clear, decisive action plan. In the face of a crisis, Daniel Harding was at his best. Emotion was a variable that clouded judgment. Action was the only logical response. He saw Zoe's debt not as a betrayal, but as a critical system failure that required immediate intervention. He would be the intervention. We are going to fix this, he said, the words firm and steady. He pulled her into a hug, a gesture he knew was expected. Together. I will help you. Zoe looked up at him, her eyes wide with relief. You would do that? But it's so much money. You are not asking, Daniel stated. I am offering. We are married. Your liabilities are my liabilities. We will absorb this impact, and reinforce the structure. In the days that followed, Daniel executed his plan with ruthless efficiency. His contingency fund. $28,000. Savings for the kitchen remodel. $16,000. He liquidated his stock portfolio. Another $5,000. In total, he gathered $49,000. A purely logical transaction. He was transferring capital, to eliminate a high-risk liability. He moved the entire sum into Zoe's personal bank account. It was enough to clear all her debts. And provide a small cushion. Zoe thanked him with a fervor that bordered on hysteria. He was the most wonderful husband in the world. She didn't deserve him, she would spend the rest of her life making it up to him. Daniel accepted her gratitude as the natural byproduct of a successful crisis resolution. He believed her, because it was the logical outcome. The system, he believed, had been restabilized. The next morning, a Friday, Daniel woke at his usual time. 6 a.m. He rolled over. The space beside him was empty. And cold. The house was unnervingly silent. He got dressed, his movements precise and automatic, and went downstairs to make coffee. As the dark liquid dripped, he called her name. Zoe? Silence. He went upstairs, a flicker of unease entering his carefully controlled emotional state. He checked the bathroom. Empty. He walked to her studio in the garage. The new kiln was cold. Her potter's wheel was still. He returned to their bedroom, and on a sudden, illogical impulse, opened her closet. A significant section was empty. Her favorite dresses. The boots she wore to art fairs, gone. He moved to the dresser. The drawer where she kept her passports. Empty. His heart began to beat at an accelerated, inefficient rhythm. He grabbed his phone and called her. Directly to voicemail. He sent a text. "Where are you?" I was concerned. No reply. He tried again. And again. Each failed attempt amplified his anxiety, mixing it with a strange, cold feeling he refused to name. He went back downstairs. Scanning the kitchen. And there it was. On the polished granite of the island. A small, square piece of paper. A handwritten note. "I need some space. Don't try to find me." He read the words 3 times. Space? The term was vague. Illogical. Why would she need space now? He spent the day in a state of controlled turmoil, calling his office to report a sudden illness. He sat in the silent house. Running scenarios. But the clinical nature of her departure, the calculated removal of her belongings, the coldness of the note, it felt less like a retreat. And more like a planned extraction. By nightfall, Daniel's analytical mind shifted from damage control to forensic investigation. He needed hard data. He went to the shared desktop computer and logged into their joint email account. He scrolled through the inbox. Nothing. Then he noticed a folder he'd never paid attention to before. Archived. 20. He clicked it. He began to scroll. Then he saw a name. Miles. The exchanges started nearly 2 years ago. He opened one. A conversation about glaze chemistry. Seemingly professional. But there was a familiarity in the tone. An undercurrent of intimacy that felt inefficient. He opened another. Dated 6 months ago. An email from Zoe to Miles. "I can't keep living this structured, colorless life. He plans everything, even our weekends. I feel like one of his assets, not his wife. Being with you is the only time I feel like I can breathe." The words didn't break his heart. They offended his sense of order. Colorless? Structured? He had provided her with a life of absolute security. He saw it as a perfect symbiotic relationship. She was describing it as a prison. He kept reading, his breath growing short and sharp. An email from 3 weeks ago. From Zoe. "He'll never understand. I need to get out. I just need to handle this one last thing, this financial mess, and then I can be free. With you. We can finally start." Start what? The answer was sickeningly clear. The debt. The tearful confession. The desperate plea for help. It hadn't been a crisis. It had been a strategy. An exit strategy. She had used his money, his carefully managed capital, to clear her liabilities so she could start a new life with another man. He stood up from the chair. A wave of cold fury washing over him. This wasn't a simple affair. This was premeditated financial fraud. Interwoven with emotional betrayal. He tried to access her personal email. Password changed. He checked her social media. Blocked. She had systematically severed every connection. He needed confirmation. He called Chloe, Zoe's closest friend. "Daniel. Is everything okay?" "Chloe," Daniel said, his voice a low, controlled monotone. "I need to know where Zoe is." There was a long, heavy pause. "Oh, Daniel. I don't know if I should say." "Please," he said. "I need to know what is happening." Another silence. Then a sigh. "Look. She's with Miles. Miles Vance. He owns a gallery in Tacoma. They met about 2 years ago. They've been involved for a while now, Daniel." His legs felt weak. He gripped the edge of the desk. "How long?" "Over a year. Maybe 18 months. I'm so sorry. Where does he live?" Daniel's voice was now devoid of any warmth. It was the voice he used for hostile negotiations. "I really shouldn't." "Where, Chloe?" She relented, giving him the name of the gallery. Vance Modern Arts. Daniel thanked her and hung up. He searched for the gallery, found the address. Tacoma. An hour south on Interstate 5. He grabbed his car keys and a jacket. The drive was a blur of headlights and rain-slicked asphalt. His mind wasn't processing grief. It was processing the sheer, audacious scope of the deception. Every late night. Every workshop. Every networking event. It had all been a meticulously constructed lie. He hadn't been a husband. He had been the underwriter. For his own destruction. Daniel arrived in Tacoma just after 10 p.m. The gallery was dark. But above it, on the second floor, lights were on. He saw shadows moving. His heart pounded not with fear or sadness, but with the cold adrenaline of imminent confrontation. This was the final stage of his investigation. Presenting the findings. He climbed the steel staircase. And knocked on the door. 3 loud, evenly spaced raps. The door opened. A man stood there, tall. Lean. "Miles. Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm here for Zoe," Daniel said. His voice. Unnervingly calm. Miles's face shifted. "Look, I don't think." "Don't lie to me," Daniel said, taking a step forward, forcing the other man to back away. "I know she's here, I'm not leaving." Miles hesitated, then glanced over his shoulder. "Zoe, someone is here." She appeared from a room in the back. When she saw Daniel, all the color drained from her face. "Daniel. What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same question," he replied, stepping past Miles into the loft. He took in the scene. Spacious. Expensive art. Clearly, his internal narrator noted, the gallery business is profitable. Or it is now. "You can't just barge in here," Miles started. Daniel ignored him. His focus was entirely on Zoe. "How long?" he asked. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "Daniel, this isn't the time." "How long, Zoe?" His voice rose, the calm facade beginning to crack. "Almost 2 years," she admitted, her voice a whisper. Daniel let out a short, bitter laugh. 2 years. "So for 2 years, you were sleeping in my bed, eating my food, using the financial security I provided. All while you were with him." "It wasn't like that," she tried. "Wasn't it?" Daniel took another step toward her. "Then explain to me how it was. Explain the lies. And please, explain how you fabricated a financial crisis to drain my savings, before you made your exit." "The debts were real," she insisted, tears welling. "I'm sure you did," Daniel countered. "But for what? For the new kiln? Or for the hotel rooms where you met him? For the security deposit? On this apartment?" The ensuing silence was a confession. Daniel turned his attention to Miles. "Did you know she was married?" Miles cleared his throat. "She told me you were separated." Daniel nodded slowly. "Separated. That's interesting. Because 2 days ago, she was crying in my arms, thanking me for saving her. Does that sound separated to you?" Miles had no answer. Daniel turned back to Zoe, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. "You used my money. My emergency fund. You used it to fund his future. You looked me in the eye, you cried, and you manipulated me. That has a name, Zoe. It's called theft. I was going to pay you back," she sobbed. "Pay me back?" He laughed again, a harsh, humorless sound. "Do you really think I believe that? You were never coming back. You planned to disappear. I spent 10 years building a life with you," Daniel said, standing directly in front of her now. "I trusted you completely. And you threw it all away. Why? Because I didn't love you anymore." The words erupted from her, a torrent of desperate, painful honesty. "I haven't loved you in years, Daniel. I felt like I was suffocating. You and your spreadsheets and your risk assessments. I couldn't breathe. Then I met Miles, and he made me feel alive." The words should have hurt. But to Daniel, they were just more data. The final confession confirming his hypothesis. "Fine," he said with a chilling finality. "You didn't love me. I can accept that as a failed investment. But you didn't have to steal from me." "I didn't steal. You took $49,000 under false pretenses," he stated, cutting her off. "That is the textbook definition of fraud. And you will be paying for it." He stepped back toward the door. He gave Miles one last look. Of utter contempt. "You think you won something here? You've ended up with a person who is capable of years of deception, who uses people as financial instruments and then discards them. Good luck with that investment." You're going to need it. He walked out, descended the stairs, and got into his car. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He took a single, deep breath, containing the emotional storm that threatened to break. Then he put the car in drive, and headed back to Seattle. Alone on the dark highway, the ruins of his former life receding in the rearview mirror. On Monday morning, Daniel sat in the sleek office of Eleanor Vance, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being as sharp and unforgiving as a shard of glass. He presented his story not as a heartbroken husband, but as a plaintiff in a fraud case. He laid out the facts calmly, methodically, supported by a folder of evidence. Eleanor listened. "Mr. Harding," she said, "Washington is a community property state. However, there is a strong precedent for cases involving financial misconduct. We can argue this with vigor." "I want it all back," Daniel said. "Or as much as the law will allow." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then that is what we will pursue." The divorce proceedings were a battle, but a one-sided one. The emails, the bank records, a reluctant deposition from Chloe, painted an undeniable picture of deceit. The final ruling was a decisive victory for Daniel. The judge characterized Zoe's actions as egregious financial misconduct. She was ordered to repay the full $49,000. The house was declared his sole property. She was left with nothing but the crushing weight of her choices. Her professional life imploded. Word spread. Galleries became wary. Clients disappeared. Her relationship with Miles did not survive the fallout. He ended things with a text message. Zoe was left alone, in a small apartment in Tacoma, her reputation in tatters. Daniel, meanwhile, navigated the aftermath with methodical precision. The house felt too large, too silent. He sold the furniture they had picked out together. He hired a therapist, approaching his emotional recovery as a project with defined goals. He needed to understand the breach in his defenses, to ensure it would never happen again. A year later, at a corporate mixer, he was introduced to a woman named Sarah. She was an actuary, a profession he deeply respected. She was intelligent, logical. Her life was as well-ordered as his. It was the most comfortable first conversation he'd ever had. Their relationship developed slowly, cautiously. He learned his lesson. Trust was not to be given freely. It had to be earned, verified, and continually reassessed. He would not be blindsided again. Zoe tried to contact him a few times during that first year. Emails with subject lines like, "I'm so sorry." He deleted them without opening them. He blocked her new number. To him, she was a closed account. A risk that had been neutralized. One evening, sitting with Sarah in his perfectly arranged living room, he felt a moment of profound peace. His life was secure. His assets were protected. His future was predictable. He had successfully built a fortress around himself, impenetrable and safe. He had won. But as he looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, a vast and complex system of lights and lives, he felt a sudden, inexplicable void. He had eliminated all the risk. But in doing so, he had also eliminated the chaotic, unpredictable, and sometimes beautiful possibility of failure. He had built the perfect structure. But he was living in it alone. The system was stable, but the silence was absolute. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.